Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brook, or as you may have guessed at this point, the Undead DM. And in today's minor rant, it's gonna be something that I've thought about after returning to some of my gaming roots and not really discussing it with others, but watching a few videos on it, primarily some of the pack tactics videos and that. So, restorative features. What do I mean by restorative? Well, basically anything that can give a player hit points or give a player the ability to somewhat circumvent death. I think, in my opinion, that restorative abilities, they do cause some issues with gameplay in terms of the narrative, because as a dungeon master, you have to build a narrative, and the only way that as a dungeon master you can properly convey the deadliness of an enemy is by killing not characters like the players, but killing NPCs. But if your players can just circumvent that by saying, nope, they're no longer dead, that does feel a bit bad, narratively speaking. But I do think restorative abilities as a design concept are necessary, and that they cause less problems than is initially brought up. The main problem with healing abilities in 5th edition as of right now is that there's really no good reason to restore hit points. When you look at spells in later levels, or even sometimes in the same level, there's very clearly a good and a bad option. Let's take the classic example, Healing Word versus Cure Wounds. What are the difference between the two? What are the differences? Well, one is ranged, one is melee. One heals a D4, one heals a D8. That's it. They both use a first level spell slot, and they both heal a negligible amount of HP. Granted, this is because they're typically going to be used very early, like levels 1 through 4. But even at that point, it's a pretty negligible amount of HP. The problem stems that the caster has to expend a resource that they could use to do other things. Like, why is Cure Wounds only a D8, but Inflict Wounds, which is another first level spell that they have access to, does 3 times the damage? Why is damage output so much higher than the restorative amounts? It's very, very interesting to me that when designing 5th edition, they decided to make restorative abilities basically useless and not be worth using outside of a non-combat scenario. Like, why on earth would I spend a 7th level spell slot to heal somebody 70 hit points with the heal spell if I can just use a first level slot to give them just enough HP to get back up and be able to use my higher level spell slots to do more damaging things? Why would I do that? What is the benefit of healing 70 HP over dealing a potential 100 plus damage because the area of effect hit 4 people and each one gets dealt 30 points of damage? Why would I want to heal 70 when I can deal 130? doesn't make sense. And at least in 4th edition, I know, shocking, we're going back to that again. Talked at length about 4th edition already. And although I've only played it once, I do think it's a very well-designed system, all in terms of the restorative features. There are a few things I don't like about it, but that'll be a video for another time. But in 4th edition, there wasn't really a heal. It wasn't a roll the dice and you heal this much. Every single ability that allowed people to gain health back was based on healing surges. And healing surges were a number of times per day, meaning you had to take a long rest. Short rests, I don't think restored any, if my memory recalls. So you got a lot of healing surges. You got around 7 on average, like 6 or 7 on average per class. And the leaders in particular, they had a lot of abilities that allowed them to heal themselves or allow allies to expend a healing surge. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Warlord even had an ability at early levels that allowed them to heal for their healing surge value without expending a healing surge, but it was a daily power. And healing surges healed a quarter of your HP. And obviously that wouldn't have a lot of benefit in the early game, as most of the time in the early game you're not going to have a lot of HP. The maximum you're gonna have, assuming that you have +3 Constitution and you have the highest hit die of a D12, you're playing a Barbarian, and you take the tough feat, you're at most getting 17 HP at level 1 and a healing surge value of, I think, like 4? Because 16 divided by 2 is 8, and then divide that by 2 again is 4, because you round down. So you're getting around 4 HP every single time. But later on, if you get, say, upwards of 125, 150, maybe 175 HP, you divide that by 4, you're getting like 50 HP, 60 HP. That's a pretty decent chunk. That's just one healing surge, and using a single power from a Warlord can cause you to heal the same amount as a 7th level spell in 5th edition. So here's my idea for an overhaul to healing. Rework the hit die system. So have 2 resources that every class can pull from. There's hit dice, and then, for lack of a term that I can't think of at the moment, like a new name for it, they have a healing surge. And you can only expend your hit dice during a short rest, and you have 2 options. 1, you can expend your hit dice to directly heal your wounds, but you won't be able to recover any hit dice until you take a short or long rest, at which point the short rest only restores half of your hit dice, and the long rest restores all of your hit dice. But then you have a healing surge amount, and the amount is equal to a number. Let's just say 5. Let's just say you get 5. And each one heals you for half of your maximum hit points. And you can expend these as, let's say, a bonus action. And you expend that healing surge, and that is gone until you complete a long rest. Now, during a short rest, you can choose to instead expend hit dice to instead heal yourself for an amount. You can spend them to regain healing surge equal to a conversion rate. similar to how sorcerers have a conversion rate for their sorcery points into spell slots. So you can expend two hit dice to get a healing surge. You can expend 4 dice to get 2 healing surges. And, it just goes up and up and up and up. Because you can get hit dice a lot easier than you can get healing surges. And then also make it so that every spell that would restore hit points, instead of the healing word being like, hey, you get a d4 plus 3 because I'm a caster. You get a d4 plus 3, so a max of 7 HP, but instead make it so I cast healing word and you can expend hit die to get back up. Like, it's not a good option, but it's there in case you need it. And then things like cure wounds, you can make it so that a creature who is at 0 hit points or whatever can expend a healing surge at the cost of your action. And since the healing surge heals for more now, having the risk of being in melee to actually administer that level of power, it would be fine. It's similar to an effect that Fade Shock from Foxtail Foundry did with his pharmacist. His pharmacist has an ability, I think it's called medical expertise, where he can expend a charge of a healer's kit, or all charges of a healer's kit, and as an action heal a creature within 10 feet of himself half of their maximum hit points. And then he also regains all expended charges of his medical kit every time they take a short or long rest. You see, that would be a fantastic thing to add to similar healing spells. It gives a better reason to take healing spells that, though would put you as the healer in more danger, it grants the people who actually need it more benefit. But Brook, you may be asking, what about things that heal directly? Like, what about an action? What about the second wind feature of the fighter? Well, that's very simple. Make the second wind once per short or long rest. Allow him to use a healing surge for free, and that's it. So basically, once per short or long rest, you can expend a healing surge without expending a healing surge. So you get half your hit points without having to really do anything. And if I were to implement this would also allow me to lower the amount of hit dice and the amount of HP that a character is meant to have. Because right now, all the marshals have 2d something of their hit die. So they get a lot of hit points. But if I implement this healing system, you don't really need that anymore, because it doesn't matter, because the healing will be a lot more beneficial, and so you don't need more hit points. Granted, some of the classes will still retain a lot of additional hit points. So I think the one that will actually have a lot of hit points will be the defender classes, so things like the fighter, the paladin, and the ranger, I think the ranger will probably be the best fit for that. They would probably have the most HP, and then barbarian, rogue, and monk will probably have the second most, because they also have to be in melee range. So yeah, healing, I think, isn't necessarily a problem in terms of restoring hit points. It just needs to be buffed. In terms of the resurrection aspect, that can be a narrative problem, but I think the only issue with restorative spells as it is right now is that it's too little cost for a potentially narrative-breaking benefit. Because if you have an important NPC that's supposed to die and the player just goes Revivify, there's nothing you can do, because it's in the spell. Granted, you could be that one DM that goes, technically, the spell Revivify says that it works on a dead creature, and since creatures are no longer creatures when they're dead, they're objects, as said by Jared and Crawford, your spell doesn't work because rules as written, this is how it works. You could be that guy, but we all know what the spell is meant to do. So, what I'd recommend is just taking all the reviving spells and giving them, guess what? A gold piece cost. Make it so that they have to have the material. Make it so that you remove materials from every other spell. It doesn't really matter to me. That's another video entirely. Remove material components except for ones that have a gold piece cost. And make it so that these are spells that are really big, like Hero's Feast, Revivify, Resurrection, True Resurrection. Hell, even things like Polymorph. Because most of the time, spellcasters are just going to take the focus anyway and remove all material components that don't have a cost anyway. So who cares? So that's my little take on healing for today. Make healing better. Remove all the reviving spells to more of a gold piece cost and all that. And I think we'll be all good on that front. But yeah.